Good afternoon. I'm going to go ahead and get started. My clock shows it's 12:01, so thank you for joining today's Lunch and Learn. This training will be recorded and posted online, but you're welcome to ask questions at any time. But I did want to let you know that the question portions will be edited out before it gets posted online. My name is Erica Thomas. I'm the Section F Long Range Planning Analyst, and I've been with the Legislative Fiscal Division for about 4 months. Also joining me online is Joe Treem, the Deputy Director for LFD, who may jump in if there are any questions about programs that I'm not able to answer. I'm pleased that you're joining us today, and I'd like to jump right into an overview of the Montana Long Range Planning Programs. Long range projects are just what they sound like. They are projects that can take a long time to complete and plan. In fact, projects may extend beyond the political terms of the legislature that appropriated to these programs. You may think of long-range planning as making investments for the future. In general, the long-range planning projects are for building and upkeep of state-funded infrastructure, and unlike House Bill 2 appropriations, the long-range planning appropriations do not end at the conclusion of a biennium. Instead, these appropriations remain until the project is complete, such as the long-range building program or the long-range IT program, or it remains until the grant is through the accrual process, such as the Renewable Resource Grant and Loan Program. Long-range planning, or what I'll call LRP programs, work differently than the other state programs, and how the programs work are dictated by statute in the Montana Code Annotated. Once a state or local agency or grant seeker applies to an LRP program for projects, the request is reviewed and ranked by a designated agency, board, or council. The governor reviews the list and presents the prioritization to the legislature. The legislature will then appropriate funding for the approved projects. If it is a construction project, bids are solicited for the work, and for grants, the funds will get distributed once the conditions of the grant are met. You've probably already noticed that LRP programs operate differently than the budgets established under House Bill 2. The main difference is that the LRP budgets are biennial, not appropriated by fiscal year. As explained previously, that appropriation can span across multiple biennia. Additionally, the appropriations are usually one time only without the continuing costs, with the exception of the operation and maintenance costs that I will get into more when we talk about the long range building program. Out of 9 LRP programs, 3 of the programs fund state and university capital projects, and the remaining LRP programs are for grants, loans for local government. The chart in this slide shows appropriations for LRP projects broken down by state government in light blue and local government in gray. In a normal year, approximately 25% of the LRP appropriation is for local government grants and loans, and that is represented by the yellow line in the graph, which shows the average of 2007 through 2021 biennia. 2023 and 2025 were unusual years and look abnormal from the other years, primarily because of the COVID relief funds through the ARPA, American Rescue Program Act, that kicked in during 2023 biennium, and also because the state revenues enabled the state to pay off the debt service for LRP. After the ARPA funds are expended, LFD expects the appropriation to return closer to the average going forward. Because LRP programs will not be able to spend more than the revenue that comes in, it is the revenue that determines the spending for the LRP programs in general. The revenue estimates determined by the upcoming November 18th Revenue Interim Committee will be used during the 2027 session to determine the funding available for LRP programs. In this slide, you can see a breakdown of the 2025 biennium funding sources for the LRP programs. The capital category is larger than normal because there was a $145 million transfer from the general fund to capital for long-range IT projects. Authority only is a concept you see in the long-range building program, and this represents private or non-state sources of revenue for a project that is not appropriated funds, but the project still must be approved by the legislature in order to proceed. As I mentioned previously, the LRP programs are not funded in House Bill 2. These programs are funded by 8 separate bills that are segregated by each LRP program. I will give a quick overview of each program in the following slides. And here is a cheat sheet summary of all the 9 LRP programs, followed by the agency that administers each one, which bill the appropriation is authorized under, and the full title of the program. The first and the biggest of the LRP programs I'd like to start with is the Long Range Building Program. Before I go into the LRBP, I want to point out how I've organized this slide and the other LRP program slides. So as I go through each LRP program slide, pay attention to the box at the lower left corner for each program as I go through them. This will show the responsible agency, the Montana Code annotated citation for the program, and the budget that was appropriated for the 2025 biennium. I've also organized each LRP slide to start with a brief description of each program, followed by a summary of the revenue sources that fund the programs. So back to the LRBP. The purpose of this program is to fund the acquisition, construction, or maintenance of state-funded lands and buildings. House Bill 5 is the primary bill where funds are appropriated for LRBP. However, there were additional funds in House Bill 817 for the DOC low slide housing, House Bill 856 for the Capitol complex, and House Bill 872 for the behavioral health under DPHHS for the 2025 biennium. Oh, I forgot to say in the previous slide, when new or renovated projects are funded through LRBP, by statute, operation and maintenance is also appropriated, but then it will become part of an agency's base budget and become appropriated in House Bill 2 in the future. LRBP is separated in 2 primary funding sources, the major repairs funding and the capital development funding. So this slide shows major repair funding, and eligible projects must meet the criteria, which includes the renovation, alteration, replacement, or repair projects with a total cost less than 2.5 million, a new facility with a total construction cost greater than 250,000, and a current replacement value greater than 150,000. In the 2025 biennium, there was a one-time only transfer from the Capital Development Fund to the Major Repairs Fund in House Bill 5 for $41.4 million. Other funding comes from a 2.6 distribution of the cigarette tax revenue, a 12% distribution of the coal severance tax revenue, and then House Bill 2 appropriated general fund transfers, which the transfers to bring the annual major repair spending to the level of 0.6% of the current replacement value of all LRBP eligible buildings. So what that means is a current replacement value is determined, and this is a calculation that determines the minimum level of funding that will be appropriated for the major repairs funding. This is based on data from the statewide facility inventory and condition assessment report, which inventories all the state-owned buildings and determines their replacement value. For those buildings eligible for LRBP, the total replacement value is used in the current replacement value calculation. And from the statewide facility inventory and condition assessment report that was just released last month, this calculation means the minimum funding level was determined to be 42.3 million for the next biennium. The other source of funding for LRBP is the capital development funding. Eligible projects for this funding are the renovation, construction, alteration, site, or utility projects with a total cost that's equal or greater than 2.5 million, a new facility with a construction cost greater than 250,000, or a replacement value that's greater than 150,000. Funding for this comes from a House Bill 2 transfer of 1% of general fund revenue, and this amount equaled to 27.7 million in 2024 and 24.2 million in 2025. Also, the Board of Investment earnings, which were 37.4 million in fiscal year 2024, 6.04 million so far in fiscal year 25. Then also transfers from the Budget Stabilization Reserve Fund, which was 70.4 million in 2025. And finally, a transfer from House Bill 856 for the Capitol Complex Legislative Branch renovations, which was 5 million in 2024. Other sources, a capital development funding in 2025 included funding the ROSE project, which is the remote office workspace study, and also the projects mentioned in the first slide for the DOC low side project, DPHHS, and the Capitol Complex renovations. Moving on to the second LRP program, that's the State Building Energy Conservation Program. The purpose of this program is to make loans available to LRBP and other state-owned buildings to put energy-efficient projects into place that will save money. Savings realized from the energy savings from these projects, along with 3% interest to the loan, are repaid to the DEQ, which funds the administrative costs of the program. The 2025 biennium includes funding for FWP lighting projects at 5 locations, the Missoula campus lighting, labor and industry lighting, DPHS lighting and energy improvements, and then also 4 projects for the Montana University. The third LRP program is the Long Range Information Technology Program, LRITP, which funds the large IT projects into a single bill, which is House Bill 10. Agency funds are transferred into the LRITP program to pay for the costs. In the 2025 biennium, there was an additional $145.2 million transferred from the general fund to fund projects that were not funded with the SSR or the state special revenue or the federal sources coming from the agencies. This includes the Montana Cybersecurity Project, Department of Justice CARS project, the Department of Commerce Offender Management System, and various other projects. The fourth LRP program is the Montana Coal Endowment Program, MCEP, which is a program used to provide infrastructure grants to local government. MCEP funding comes from a subtrust of the Permanent Coal Severance Tax Trust with a corpus fixed at $268 million. Interest earned on this subtrust is transferred to MCEP for grants that they give out to cities, towns, counties, and tribal governments, county or multi-county water, sewer, or solid waste districts. And I've included a link to, if you would like to take a look at the Coal Trust brochure, which does a nice job of breaking down the trust and where the money gets transferred and such. And it's a really good visual of where the money's going. The fifth LRP program is the Montana Coal Endowment Program Regional Water System, also known as MCEPRW, which funds the state share of the regional water system projects. Like MCEP, this program is also funded by interest earned in a subtrust of the Coal Severance Tax Trust with a corpus of $98.1 million. The interest that's earned is used to provide grants, and it also funds the administrative costs for DNRC to administer the program, as well as for the 4 regional water authorities listed here. The 6th LRP program is the Renewable Resource Grant and Loan, also known as RRGL program, that was established to issue loans for the conservation, development, management, and preservation of resources in Montana. Funding for this program comes from the proceeds of the issuance of coal severance tax bonds and also the loan repayments that are used to pay the debt service of the loans. Some of the big projects funded in the 2025 biennium include the Yellowstone and Gallatin County wastewater systems, Townsend water system, and many others for a total of 70 water, wastewater, and irrigation projects. The 7th LRP program is the Reclamation and Development Grant Program, also known as RDGP. This is a grant program to help reclaim lands that have been degraded. Funding comes from the interest income of the Resource Indemnity Trust. Also, the Resource Indemnity and Groundwater Assessment Tax, a 2.16% of oil and natural gas production taxes remaining after other required distributions, excess coal severance tax proceeds allocated to the Renewable Resource Loan Debt Service Fund, and fees or charges for servicing of loans. Okay. The 8th LRP program is the Cultural and Aesthetic Grant Program. Its purpose of this program is to provide grants for art, cultural, and historical programs, and it is funded with investment earnings from a statutory trust receiving distributions of the coal severance tax. Eligible applicants include, but are not limited to, the state of Montana and regional, county, city, town, or Indian tribal governments and arts, history, and other cultural-based nonprofit organizations. The grants are typically around 10,000 or under, and there were 64 projects funded in the 2025 biennium. Finally, the last long-range planning program is the Montana Historic Preservation Grant, also called MHPG. This provides historical grants to preserve Montana's history and historical sites. Funding for this program comes from a transfer from the accommodation sales tax. Up until the end of this calendar year, it will receive 5% of the sales tax from the accommodations tax, but that will increase to 6% starting on January 1st. There were 29 projects funded this biennium, including the Milligan Building, National Museum of Forest History, Kelly Block Building, and many others. So to summarize the long-range planning programs, here is a single chart that shows the 2025 biennium funding. It is organized by the appropriation bill in the rows and the type of funding in the columns. For example, for the final LRP program that we just looked at, the MHPG program, that's under House Bill 12, and it was appropriated 11.4 million of state special revenue for the 2025 biennium. Total funding for the LRP programs in the 2025 biennium is $1.77 billion investment in the state-funded infrastructure. To wrap up the LRP programs, I would like to invite you to look at the statewide LRP map that is found on the link on the slide. It is organized by bill, program, and county so that you can drill down and see how the infrastructure funding has been distributed around the state of Montana. And I'm going to try to click on this and see if it'll show. Okay. And here's what it looks like online. Whoops, that's not the right screen for me. Get this shown here. Okay, so this is the map that was on the slideshow. So you see, you can select from the counties the programs or the bills and drill down into the various locations and see how the different fundings have been distributed across the whole state. So it's just a very nice tool to be able to visualize where the money is going in Montana. So that concludes this presentation of the long range planning overview. Let me go to the last slide. And thank you for joining us today.